this is where being patient really pays off. We're going to put this aside for tonight. Let this dry so this epoxy is rock hard. And many times I've tried to rush this and just go jumping right ahead and put the bottom of the fuselage on. Now one of the tricks we're going to do, just keep this in mind while this is drying. I'm going to sit and have a cup of coffee here. Oh hi, the alligator. Keep in mind what I'm trying to do here is I have the table glued to the body. So that's holding the body in alignment. So now before I unglue the body, I want to glue the bottom saddle in place. But I want that epoxy to be rock hard. And before I do that, I'll double check all the way out the wing, the front of the wing, make sure all our center lines line up. Now, can't say this too much. This takes time. This took me a whole Saturday. And it's late at night now. And believe me, I'm tired. This was a big job. Cutting that chop, that notch out of the wing. Several hours of fitting. And this is maybe not the easiest way to build a plane, but it certainly lets you get the weight back by the center of gravity. If you can keep the tail light, you can take advantage of some of this barbell effect being reduced. And the other thing right now is I'm tired and I wouldn't be doing quality work. So I'm going to kind of put this guy to sleep for the night. And when I come back in the morning and glue the saddle on the wing, this morning, first thing we'll do is get all our pins and stuff out. This dried up nice overnight. We can get the weights off it now. Epoxy's rock hard. Should be in really good shape here. Again, just twist the pins and pull them out. That trick right now is we want to get the cradle on here. That's the next step. Now, needless to say, it's going to need some trimming. It's going to need a little bit of fooling around with to get a nice tight fit. You can pull these guys out from the flaps. We're going to leave that wood down there. We'll trim that with a razor blade later. Alright, so step one is we're going to try to fit this up. Get the sanding block out and try to get it all fitted up. Usually you have to trim this maybe between a 32nd and a 64th of an inch. But what I do is I just run the pen along there and get a little indicator of how much has to go off. And of course you can just block sand down to that line now and you'll have a pretty good test fit anyway, beginning test fit. And you just gotta, again, you gotta fool around with this. This is something that just takes time to get it just right. You can see how much we have to go. And we'll do a little test fit here. And then again, just pick up the high spots and keep working it down until you get it right. I put a little bit of carbon fiber in the middle here as a base. Just getting rid of the extra resin now. Okay, we got the bottom of the fuse drying up, the epoxy's drying now. We'll make our little braces for up here. be the next step. Alright, we got that carbon fiber tape in there. Everything's drying up with the epoxy nice now. And we're going to let this sit until that cures. Probably come back and work on this tonight or tomorrow. Now that whole fuselage is in there, and it's still glued to the table. I've got the little braces, the little doublers on, and before I flip it over, I want everything finished in here. Now we got to keep that whole bottom open like a trough. Can't go running formers in there or anything, so I'm trying to stiffen it up as best I can. Okay, this morning we're going to just clean up inside here, make the bell crank mount. Oh, the epoxy hardened up nice overnight. And finish off inside the fuselage here a little bit. We're tracing out the bell crank support for the bottom. We trimmed down the shape on this bell crank bolt support. Hot stuff that right in. And you can see that actually supports the bell crank bolt and connects all the pieces of the fuselage together. Now all I'm doing is putting a coat of black dope inside here where once I glue the bottom on I won't be able to get in here real conveniently. And get this coat of black dope in here. All this is to fuel proof it up a little bit, just in case we have a little bit of a tank leak or vent popping off or something that'll get fuel in here. And I'll go all the way back to the tail fin on this, all the way to the back so they match. Okay, we got a coat of black on the whole inside here. The next step is going to be to break this off the table and flip it over. Just going around with a brand new razor and breaking off the hot stuff joints to the glass. Now we're making up the top belt crank mount now. We got this broken off the table. And we're going to be trying to brace this up and carbon fiber the front here, right in front of the belt crank mount, just like we did on the bottom. Just really a duplicate of what we did on the bottom. Okay, we have the upper belt crank mount in there now. And we're going to do the glassing in the front of the wing next. Now some of these spots you're going to see from time to time coming and going on the video. The little spots where I've had to touch up the silver, I see a little flaw in it. I block sand it out with 400 and I just touch it up. I like to touch this up as I'm going. This way I don't get to the end of the plane and have a tremendous amount of filling and fooling around to do. This is just one. I got one over here that I've just been noticing little flaws and ripples and stuff and picking them out and cleaning them up as I go along. Like an ongoing basis. Now anytime we're doing any of the epoxy or fiberglass work on this airplane, it's with that same material, that one tube is bigger than the other. Same kind of epoxy. In this case we're trying to carbon fiber up a little brace on the front of the wing. Because we've taken so much out of the front of the wing, I just feel a little more comfortable if this had a little more of a brace in the middle. And this is what I'm going to do right now. Just take some carbon fiber and deck it in there, lay it in there. I'm using Dave Brown's carbon fiber in this particular case. Now it's a big help if you have new scissors. Unfortunately I don't. Now in this case we can leave it just hanging out the side. We're going to go up across the middle and up the fuselage side. It's only a small area to go. kind of let the epoxy set up just a little bit. And once it's in there, starting to harden up, you can trim the edges off pretty reasonably anyway. And we got the edges off. Now you can kind of get down with the single edge razor and press this all down. Now the epoxy up here is kind of dry. I started working on making up the little fillets. A lot of people leave these go to the last thing. I like to get them done right about now. But what I'm going to start doing, I'll do the one on this side too. What I'm going to start doing is sanding away at that fillet and trying to get it rounded off. I don't want to do any work up on the nose yet, while that fiberglass is still a little tacky. I'll let that dry overnight before I go on to the next step. I'll work on these fillets a little bit now. I got about another hour before I finish up tonight. And get these kind of squared away. Now one of the things I like to do, nice little trick, is to take some 320 sandpaper, fold it over 3 times before I ever do anything with that fillet. Get that clearance just right. I'll do the same thing on this side. 3 layers of 320 gives you just about the right clearance that when it builds up the paint, of course you're not supposed to pull a flap off. If you build up the layers of paint, you still have a real nice clearance and you can kind of sand away at it in between coats of clear and stuff. And keep it a nice fit. Again, that's one of the touches, I think, of a professional type plane rather than a botch job or something that's where you rush your way through. These are the real quality touches, the fillet lines, the flap hinge lines, the cowl lines. That will get you almost a perfect gap every time. Now one thing that I think is really important at this point in time is, remember that center line we lined up on the fuselage? Let's see if we can see it here. To get that fillet exactly even, get it right in the middle of that fillet, okay? And the same thing on the other side, because that's going to set your flaps to neutral when you put your flaps on the final time. Really getting that right in neutral is a kind of a critical thing right about now. Make sure that's right. I think this view shows you just getting that alignment, how important that really is. That establishes your flaps at neutral and the wing at neutral all at the same time. The center of lift is neutralized now. Here's our center lines lining up at the middle, the front of the fuselage and the front of the wing. And you can see we got them pretty well lined up there. And of course now we got both of the flaps. Flaps are both in neutral now. Now to make the fillets on this plane, this plane is going to have fillets made out of wood. I'm going to take a piece of 1/4 inch wood, trace out the root, half of the root of the wing, trace out a 1/4 inch piece and jigsaw it out. That'll be step one. So we use the template and then just lay a piece of 1/4-inch tape around it, and that gives us our outline of the fillet. And we'll saw this out. And there's our piece of wood. Of course, it's 1/4-inch square. Now we're going to have to take the inside edge and break it down, because we already have a little fillet of glue in there. So the first thing is to break off that inner edge. Okay, now we have the exact fillet. Let's see if you can place this on here. And the inside where the radius is, it's knocked down, and I also have the outside of it rough shaped. Now I'll hand sand the outside edge of it, so I almost have the fillet shape on the fillet before I ever glue it on. Now I attach this up here with slow drying type stuff. Just keep pressing it down to get the fit. Now before you start putting the final shape in the fillet radius, lay some tape along both sides of the fillet in case we slip a little with the sandpaper. I know we always slip. And the wooden fillets, they definitely do have a lot more strength than anything else I've ever used. Of course, there's a little bit of work involved. It's probably an hour or so each to do these fillets, but I think it's worth it. The only trick you got to remember is up in the nose. You got to remember the radius up in the nose is going to be bigger than in the back because of the angle of the front of the wing. So you have to use two different size radius tools. Of course, what we got is a piece of balsa wood with a radius and some of that sticky back sandpaper. This will be good for just roughing it out. We'll just switch down now to like 220 grit and 320 until we get a nice smooth fit on that fillet. Of course, the last step is you take off the tape and then just do the final blending in around the edges with 400 or 320. Now in this case, this fillet's going to run up onto the top block a little bit, so we'll have to save the final sanding for after the top block is installed. So we can get all the basic shaping and carving done right now. Step is just fill in with DAP. This is DAP Fast and Final Spackling compound. There's two kinds of DAP. There's a real light DAP and there's a heavy DAP. Needless to say, get the light stuff if you possibly can. It's real cheap. It's the same exact stuff as Model Magic filler. Sands nice and easy. Doesn't have tremendous strength, but doesn't need it either. The kind of application used. Now that wood fillet has definitely added some strength to this program. The nice part about it is you can make a relatively big fillet and it'll be super light and super strong. You have the grain of the wood going in the direction back here. Keeps the integrity of everything nice. Nice little extra touch. Now obviously up here when we get the top block on, we're going to have to blend that in. And of course the next thing is you got to let this dry overnight. Come back. And we're sanding in all them fillets now with 220 with that tool that I have. Make sure you keep all the putty and glue and everything off of the horn, or it's going to be hard to get the flaps back on. And of course you finish this up by just hand sanding it in. The trick here is just take your time and be fussy. Okay, we're about ready to start the bottom. Make sure you keep that clearance in there.
'Cause we can do it all.
I got this whole fillet area sanded out nice, finished off with 400, and I want to get a coat of nitrate dope on there just to harden up the wood. Now the idea is don't go out over on the silver with the nitrate, because you go on nitrate over butyrate then. Just got to keep this just about 1/8 of an inch off the flat hinge line. And what this will do, this will help us get a nice blend. You can get a good view of just how nice that wood fillet worked out in this shot. We got a couple of coats of nitrate on this now. We're going to let this dry. You don't want to get the nitrate out over the silver butyrate. Now, the only good reason when using nitrate is it'll stick to the fillets a lot better. This morning, before I start assembling the push rod and the tail, I just want to get a little sanding done on these fillets and put another coat of talc filler on them. Never silk span the fillets, just fill them in with talc. Otherwise the silk span shrinks and pulls off the fillet. Now I got the fillets all sanded out. And I'm going to get an extra coat of talc filler on here. And while this is drying, I'll start making up the push rod. And the idea of getting this filler on here is just to harden up the wood. So while we're handling the plane and sanding out the body sides, we'll at least have this out of the way. Won't be sticking fingernails and stuff into it. It also gives us a nice blend from the fuselage side into the wing itself. Notice I'm using a striping brush, which is a good idea. It gets on a nice coat in this kind of an application. Again, you don't want the nitrate to go back out over the butyrate if possible. And the next step is we're going to start installing the push rod. Now, normally if this was a 60 ship, we'd want an arrow shaft in the back here. On this particular ship, because of the way the fuselage has so much of it's gutted out in the back, I don't think it's going to be as strong as a normal box construction fuselage. What I'm going to do is use a regular push rod and put plywood fair leads or bushings all along the push rod. Now the reason for that is when you do have an arrow shaft, you have to gut out and hollow out quite a bit of the body. And we also already have the whole bottom of the half gutted out of the body. So I don't want to make this just a big empty shell of a body. I want to keep as much of the form as in place as possible. And what the regular push rod will let me do is keep as much of the form of there, the integrity of this. It's geodetic, of course. If I start cutting away big giant pieces of it to get the arrow shaft, then I'm going to lose a lot of the integrity. So that's the theory behind this. Now I have one end of the push rod already bent up. Let's see if we can get a look at what I've got here now. And I have that little copper bushing that's going to get us equal slop in the controls, up and down equally. I'm going to slide that on and put that right in the horn for now. That'll be part of that. So then when I'm done doing all the alignments, the tail will be all aligned, all the controls are neutral. I'll pull this bushing off, solder the washer on this side, and I'll have equal slop up and down. That equal slop is a real important thing if you want to get a plane to turn equally. It's my opinion anyway. Again, I measured out the tail moment arm that I want to have on this ship, which is 17 and a half, and I've got it 17 and a half inch push rod made up. I also have the little, and I'll dial in on this with the macro lens and show you, I've got little notches cut in here that I can wrap copper wire around it. So actually I'm going to leave this end of it unsoldered, solder the tail on, start notching out my notch for the push rod with the idea in mind. I don't want any more of this notched out than necessary, and then I'm going to glue at each rib station, I'm going to glue little pieces of 1/8 inch plywood so that this is running in a nice tight, much like when you run a profile and you brace the push rod all along. I'll have about 3 or 4 braces in there. Another thing, whenever you make up a push rod ahead of time, whether it's an arrow shaft or this, you want to look down it this way and make sure that both of the arms are parallel. A lot of times you'll see a push rod, a guy will make a push rod, one end will be straight and one end will be like that, and so when you put it in the horn, because they're like this, they're not dead equal, they're cocked one way or the other, they wear the hell out of the bushings right away and make everything egg-shaped. Real important to get everything at 90 degrees here, and what I do, I lay the push rod on a table and just check it with a triangle at both ends, or you can just sight it. That's usually good enough. Alright, so the first step is going to be, on this guy anyway, is I'm going to solder this on one end. Let's get a little picture on the macro lens here. Now you can see how I have with a parting wheel, I've made little notches so that after the washer is soldered on, I can get both ends of this. Right here I can get a soft copper wire wrapped around and then Stay Bright silver soldered on both ends. Both ends are the same on this. And of course you should do that on all soldering joints. This is the end of the push rod that's going to have that bushing slide on and off. That bushing is just there to do the tail alignment. That's all, only purpose that serves. Now what I also do, I'm going to cut the notch for the saddle for where the elevator and step is going to sit in a body. I always make a test piece first. In this case, this is a piece of 16th balsa. And I just make a test piece here, and I'll try to get this on camera, that has that curvature that I want in there. And this piece, of course, just keep filing and sanding away. Now I've got that pretty nice. Then I'm going to, of course, once I get the alignment, I'm going to drop this down onto the body and get the exact hinge line location, which is the center line. Cut this out, and this will just drop right in position while that copper bushing is holding me in dead neutral. Of course, while you're doing that, everything has to be in dead neutral. So the first step in this whole operation is get these flaps in dead neutral and get them solid. Now what I did, I folded up IBM cards and just shoved them into the hinge lines. That, and I'm going to sight down both ends and make sure I've got dead neutral on the flaps. That's going to be the first thing I want to get is dead neutral on the flaps. Okay, that's step one, get the neutral. That is the best way. You want to sight right down the trailing edge and pick up the center line that you already have on the side of the body. And these are kind of solid now. Get that exactly neutral, both sides of course. Another little thing, just a little hint. Whenever you put a push rod in, always put it so that centrifugal force is pushing it in. In other words, with the point of the push rod facing the outboard wing. That's why if them washers ever get loose, obviously one thing is centrifugal force may hold it in place until you land the plane. The other thing is because you have centrifugal force on this, you're constantly putting an even pressure on the bushing. You're not pulling the push rod out of the bushing, you're pushing the push rod into the bushing. So it's good to have both joints of the push rod facing out. Now this is one thing I just want to show on the video. I don't know if I showed this already. These are these little miniature washers. You can copy the part number down here. They're available from Walthers. They're placed at almost every hobby shop that stocks HO trains has these. They're 256 brass washers, and what they're for is this little job right here where I've put Stay Bright silver solder the washer onto the push rod end, and of course on the other end too. Now, a couple of things about silver solder. When you see you have a shiny joint like this, it's really shiny, you know you have a good joint. If the joint looks dull, you know you need more heat at the soldering joint. Also, whenever you're done with Stay Bright solder, for sure, absolutely for sure, clean everything with alcohol. Clean it up real good, because that flux that's in Stay Bright silver solder will make the metal rust in a matter of a day or so. It's real good stuff. And any soldering joint I recommend on a whole plane is use Stay Bright silver solder. Don't try using any of this Radio Shack stuff as the cheap stuff that you buy for $1 a pound. The Stay Bright is the ticket. And what I'm doing, I'm just dropping this push rod down. I'm trying to take out the minimum amount out of the formers. Now, if you were doing a non-pipe ship, I think it'd be fine to use an arrow shaft. There's no problem. I never had a problem with that. But right now, with this kind of a setup, where half of the body is just a big shell, I want to keep as much of these formers in here as I possibly can. I don't want to gut anything away that I don't have to. And what I do, I just drop each one down, then I'll make myself up a little sanding tool. Put the notches in here. Don't want to make these notches any bigger than I have to. And you can just keep dropping it up and down and seeing which one is hitting. Now in this case right here we're hitting. Now I'll just take the push rod out for a minute and sand them nice and smooth. And make sure you can get the push rod in and out nice and easy. Now the next step is going to be to use this template. We're going to obviously put this on. Hook the tail on temporarily just to find out where the hinge line is. Okay, now we found the spot for the hinge line. Make sure we got dead neutral here. Okay, we'll put the elevators on here. And of course make sure we got neutral, then mark the hinge line. Then from the hinge line, we know this is the hinge line, we'll trace out our two pieces, our two notches on each side of the body. Okay, we got the elevators on. Now of course the one thing I forgot to mention is we want to keep the elevators in dead neutral. Same time we have this pinned in dead neutral. Let's get this pinned in neutral. Okay. Now what we're looking to do is establish a hinge line here on both sides. And obviously we want the tail hinge line to hinge line here. We want the hinge line to hinge line equal, which I haven't measured yet, but we'll definitely do that. Okay, here's the hinge line. I'm just doing this by eye for now. I've transposed the curve onto one side. Obviously I'll do the other side too. Now I always think it's a good idea when you cut this piece out, leave it a little bit oversized. In fact, I leave the ink line on there, then I try to get the lines parallel. Use a brand new X-Acto knife, of course. This will get them parallel. Then we'll start doing our alignment. Make sure you have the push rod far enough down, buried in there, so now the trick is to get the front lined up with the front of the body and the back lined up. You can see this isn't perfect now. And then just take the sanding block and sand it until it's really neutral. Now also at the same time you're doing that, you want to put a little bit of weight on this and look from the back and the front, make sure it's not getting out of parallel, so it's parallel with the wing. Now I can see from this we got to go a little bit in the back only, which is pretty good. We got really lucky here. Usually these don't fit this good. You just lucked out. We put the final soldering joint now on the push rod. We got our alignment pretty well straight now. Next step is going to be to try to finalize the alignment and get this tail tack glued in place. Now we're at the point of doing the alignment. We've got all the alignment pretty well in the ballpark. I noticed the tail is tilted just a little bit this way, so what I'm going to do is just sand down whichever the high side is, which in this case it's the outboard side. Make sure you've got everything in neutral. Get all the alignment marks. I marked the center line on a stab. Put some weight up there. And check that you've got your alignment. We still could go, how much more? 64th more. And you just got to keep playing with it until you get that alignment. And of course you want to check hinge line to hinge line. Okay. Okay, that's real close now. Alright, now the next step is hinge line to hinge line. Get that alignment. Hinge line to hinge line. I'm mixing up a little bit of slow drying epoxy here. I want to have a lot of time to check the alignment on this. Actually getting all these alignments before you actually do this gluing job is the whole job. Actually just gluing it in means nothing. Just doing all the test fits and being patient. This is one of these jobs you sure don't want to start late at night, because it could drive you crazy. You won't be able to sleep. Reason for using epoxy here is I want some time to work with this. Also, epoxy will stick to the nitrate dope a lot better. Okay, oh yeah, we got a nice fit there. Okay. Okay. Good. We're just going to weight this down now. I've got little marks here where I had the alignment before. You can make it real easy on yourself. Just put a piece of tape on the ruler where your alignment is, and you won't have to go blind looking at the numbers. Okay. Hinge line to hinge line is now real accurate. Now we gotta look this way. Let's see which one we've got. I'm sure. Try to balance this out. Okay. Make sure we didn't disturb the 15. Yeah, we did. Okay, center line is right on the money. Center line. Now, when you do it with this method, where you're gluing the fillet on at the same time as the elevator instead, I think you get a lot more accurate alignment, because if you're out by the thickness of a pencil line, it's the pencil line in double the span instead of the pencil line in half the span. Okay. And of course, once we get this epoxy dry, we'll turn it over and drip some down from the other side and hit it with the hairdryer. Get a look at the alignment from the other side of the room. Flaps are neutral. Elevator's a neutral. Tail is neutral. Of course, you're going to trip and go on your ass here. That's it right there. Now we'll just babysit this for 45 minutes or an hour, how long it's going to take this epoxy to dry. No sense leaving the camera running. Helps if you have the ruler the right way. And we'll do what I call babysitting. We'll just check it every couple minutes. Make sure we haven't lost any of the alignment. One thing I gotta always be careful of, I want to take a coffee break while I'm babysitting this, is getting impatient. Getting impatient while you're working on this stuff. Right now is a time you can't get impatient. When this dries, we'll give this 45 minutes or an hour. We're going to turn it over and get it glued from the bottom. and build a little former in here and then start working, pull out that copper bushing and work on our fair leads. If you can just maintain some patience now, it'll really pay off. It's starting to look like an aeroplane now. That's another nice thing. I just wanted to mention one other thing. You may not have, while we're watching this baby cure out here. One of the things I really wanted to try to avoid with this plane was having that push rod rattle. When you run a plane this quiet, you always can hear the push rod rattling. So obviously, an arrow shaft has to run free, and there's a lot of volume there. You'd probably get a kind of a rattly noise. I'm hoping, let's hope I'm right. I'm hoping that by bracing this push rod in as many places as possible and greasing it, I'm going to get rid of some of that push rod rattle that I have in some of the other planes that have arrow shafts. Now on a 60 ship or on a plain Tiger 46 ship, it's not a factor because the muffler and the prop override that noise. But on this guy, this definitely, you're going to hear the wheel bearings and you're going to hear all the little noises that you normally don't hear. Amazingly enough, everything is in pretty good alignment. Babysitting a plane is really one of the easiest jobs around. We're trying to make every single part of the plane quiet. And because you have slop in that push rod, you're going to have some vibration some of the time. So to get rid of that, that was one of the original reasons for using a wire instead of the arrow shaft. Of course, if this plane don't fly good, I can cut it open and put an arrow shaft in through the bottom. But I think it'll work okay. You can take out all our little things that we were holding the controls in neutral with. Now right now we got no slop in the controls, they're tight. I'm going to pull that little copper bushing out and see if I have the equal amount up and down that I want. Okay, now I got that little bushing out. And I've got that free play. And believe it or not, it's exactly in the middle where it should be. Wow, really lucked out on this one. Of course, you want half of it up and half down. See, the flaps aren't moving and the elevator's off. And up here, this whole part of the system is solid as a rock. Okay. Well, the first thing I'll do is solder the washer onto the push rod and then start making up the fair leads. Okay, we even come out of this deal with nice smooth controls. You hear that slop in the tail. Now I'm going to solder that washer on first. That's step one. Now I've got that push rod double soldered now. Now you can still see what I'm trying to show in this, but I'm not doing very good at it, is the play in that back push rod. And that play is an 1/8 inch hole and a 3/32 rod, which comes out to be just about the right amount for a new ship. And about 50 flights into the flying of the plane, and when everything loosens up, the plane should fly level by itself. Famous last words. Now, greasing up the whole control system now with PJ1. This is motorcycle chain oil, by the way. I think I showed this on a video before. It goes on like liquid and it hardens up to grease in a matter of a few minutes. Another thing too, it keeps all your soldering joints from getting corroded. I'm just getting a nice, anything that moves in here is going to get a little coat of this. Especially that one bushing that's got the play in it. That one we want to make sure we get plenty of grease on that guy. And this is this is the bell ray. PJ1 and bell ray. This you just buy this in a motorcycle place where they sell motorcycles. One can will last you a lifetime. if you build 100 ships, you'll have enough. But this will last a lifetime. This will not be one of these deals where a year later the oil or Vaseline or whatever you use disappeared. Good investment. Good idea to get a little bit on the end of the push rods too, just to avoid rust in case you didn't get all that soldering flux off. Of course, we'll do the tail horn too. Okay. We'll just wear some of this in. Okay, we're ready to start working on the bracing for the push rod. This is the bottom of the elevators. Now what I'm going to do is heat some epoxy and get down inside there, get a nice double joint with the epoxy. It's going to be hard to show that on camera because I can't get the camera high enough. Now these are some of the little braces that I'm making. And I'm going to take the Dremel tool and get the angle right so that the push rod is running on, this is spruce by the way, that the angle is right. Of course we're on an angle on the push rod, so I'll work on that angle next and get that angle right. So I'll just show you some of the hardwood blocks we have, fair leads on all the bulkheads. Now of course we'll grease this before we put the top block on. Next step is going to be to get the top blocks cut out and put on. You can see how we got this push rod braced all the way through. And of course you want to work that grease in there. Make sure everything's free. And we're about ready to put the top block on. We're going to get ready to fit this top block up. Now one of the problems, not a problem, we have to notch out the back of this with stabbing elevators. Get a nice neat fit back there. And normally we have a nose ring, and what we do is shove the block up against the nose ring and then just start lowering it down. And what you can do if you got to do it in several steps if you want it to be real accurate, is just run the pen along it. Just get yourself a little line. I like to get the biggest part of it out with a knife. I don't know if you can see the line on there. Cut this out with the knife, and then the last little bit take out with the sanding block and just keep dropping it down little by little till you got a nice tight fit. No extra air space or glue in there. We got a couple of cuts out of this now and it's starting to fit down. Now we'll go little by little from this point on. Now we're really starting to get it now. Now the rest we'll do with a sanding block. We just get a nice tight fit. Now you can see right here we got a high spot right here. This is the tool we're using. Use this for carving out the inside of the the top block. So what I'm going to do is just get in there now and get that high spot down. But this is going to take time too. If you want to get a nice tight fit, remember one of the requirements we wanted on this plane is to have a light tail. We got a short nose moment on, we want a light tail. So we don't want to get any material back here we could live without. And of course the last adjustment you have now is to get the tail straight in this dimension, only sand to one side. That's your final alignment. Now you can see we got some of that material out of there now. We're starting to sneak up on it. We got a little more to go. And that's about the best fit we can get here, reasonably. Alright, now two things I want to do. Any of the top block that touches the stab, because it's nitrate dope and stuff, I want to use epoxy. So I'm going to get some slow drying epoxy. And I want to epoxy up on the nose section. Those two things I'll do with epoxy. Then in the middle I'll just run hot stuff. And I'll make a little filler block for the tail. Now what I'm doing while this is drying, I'm holding this in real good alignment. I want to get a 90-degree on the rudder. And I don't want this to dry with a lot of stress in it, so I'm just wipe off some of this extra epoxy. Now I have the tape holding the rudder at 90 degrees. Wiping off the extra epoxy with a little bit of alcohol, a little bit of denatured alcohol here. Clean it off. While that epoxy is drying, check that we got dead 90. Just making a preliminary fillet here, so this can dry. While we're at the shop tomorrow, this will all be drying nice. Now the last step was I just glued this tube in place. This way I'll be ready to get all my DAP work in it back. I got all the DAP fillets in, I got the DAP around the tube. Should be pretty much ready to let that DAP dry up. The next step I'm going to try to get before I actually quit today is get the top block glued on. That's the next thing we're going to try to get done. We got to glue from the tail forward on the whole top block. Well, I'm just running down the length of the top block. Now if you don't have a good fit on the top block, what you can do is tape it down and then just remove the tape one piece at a time. And what I'm going to do is get this inside the cowling here, get all my joints inside here carbon fibered up. I want everything in here to be carbon fiber. Now what I did, I put a little extra carbon fiber in here. This was kind of soft, and I want that nose ring to be good and solid. Just put a little carbon fiber in, and I'm going to make the scoop in here. And what I'm doing here is just taking some 64th plywood and making a scoop. See, I can mold this around. I just got it tack glued by the nose ring. I'll get the shape I want and just hot stuff around the edge. Now this morning, one of the things I'm going to work on first thing, I want to work on this scoop area, sand this all down, get all these joints and edges and blend in by these fillets. You sand this all by hand with a block, of course. And I've got to work the back of this body up. You can see I have DAP all around that area. Got to work that area up a little bit. Now the trick here mainly is going to be to make up a bunch of small sized blocks and do all this with blocks. There's an awful lot of little spots on here got to be dressed off. And I want to dress this area around the scoop off. And then I'll be ready to do the bottom block, be ready to put that on. I got the nose pretty well sanded out now. Just putting another coat of butyrate dope on the back here. Seal this up because one of the next steps is going to be to put the bottom block on. Put a little bit extra thinner in the last coat of dope, this way you get a good bond. Make sure this is all sealed up in case we have some fuel get in here. I don't anticipate a lot getting in here, but center jointed a wing and all that fiberglass we've got in there. We want that to be solid. Now this most important thing of all is not to let any kind of fuel get on the center joint of the wing where that fiberglass is. Even though in theory that's fuel proof, I just like the feeling a lot better that it's doubly fuel proof now. Pipe planes that we do have fuel all over the middle of the wing. The wing didn't break, didn't get soft even, but I don't think it did it any good. And there's not a lot of chance that you're going to get fuel in here, in this compartment, but just in case you do, you never know when one of the old tanks will leak or some crazy thing will happen. We're hoping we're never going to see any fuel in here, or very little anyway. And I'll of course do the inside of the bottom block again. This will be the third coat on this. This will give it a good finish. Because as we're doing the outside of the plane, we're not going to be able to get in here and spray clear and that kind of thing in here, so this kind of has to do the trick. Right up to our exhaust tube in the back. Now one of the tricks I want to describe on video, and it's a real good one, you might want to really pay attention to this one. Everybody, when they do the nose of the plane where the plywood ends and the fuselage begins, when you go to carve the spinner in, you always get that ridge and it eventually cracks. It's cracked on a lot of my planes. The only way I've found that really makes that area real solid, first of all, is you got to get a good job sanding it in. Now, the reason you can't sand it in is you're sanding a hardwood into probably relatively soft balsa, and that isn't a good combination. So what I like to do, I'm going to show this on the video too. Lift this up. Okay. What I'm going to show here, and it's a real good idea. First off, we'll take a look around this guy. and show this on the video. Got the whole nose compartment all sealed up now. Got our little scoop sealed up. Turn this guy over. Gonna work on a tail next. Right up here is what you really have, and I'm going to focus in on this. This is kind of an important thing. If you ever built a plane, what usually will happen, especially if it's a 60 ship, is right around here it's going to want to crack. Almost every 60 ship you see cracks right around here. Now what I did to keep that from happening, and I think you can see it on the film, I sanded it out, and of course you always get a ridge. You can never get a nice blend. And the reason for that is you're going from hardwood into soft balsa. So what I do is I take some thin hot stuff, just pour it on there and wipe it with a paper towel. So this actually has a coat of hot stuff on it. Then you're sanding relatively hard balsa into hard plywood. You've got a much better chance of getting a smooth blend up there. Then of course the last step is to take the thick CA, put it on the end of your finger and just paint it on. The thick, now not the thin, the thick. And put what amounts to be a finish coat on there. Now that's two coats, a thin coat to soak in, a thick coat to cover. And then you'll find out you can get a really nice blend. You can get this where if you close your eye, you can't tell where one ends and one begins. And the odds are pretty good it's not going to crack. Of course we'll double soak span this too, just to make sure. I don't glass the noses of planes. If you glass the nose of planes, of course you're adding a 3/4 of an ounce or an ounce. And that might help too, but I don't glass the noses of planes, so that's not a factor I have to deal with. Now I like to use the same technique in here. Sand it down with a block that has a radius. Get it nice and smooth, and I just take hot stuff and wipe it right on there. No kicker. Whenever you do that, don't use any kicker. Just let it sit, probably sit 4 or 5 minutes. No kicker is the trick to getting it so it'll sand right off and you won't get those white bubbles, those popcorn things. And of course, one of the high points of this plane, one of the things, the focal points of it, is obviously the canopy, and I want that right around the canopy to fare into the wing. This is another one of those places where you got to take a coffee break once in a while and work for a while, and you're not going to do this all in one sitting. Sanding out the fuselage for me is probably 8 to 10 hours of just being real fussy and getting all the little blivets and blemishes out. And you've got to go over and over it. There's no way you're going to do it in one shot. Now what that hot stuff does, it makes the wood a lot harder so that you can get your joints, the joint between the blocks and the plywood and everything, you'll get them joints that they just disappear, just the way they should. And rather than looking at this stuff, just strictly use your hand. Your hand will find all the bad spots immediately. You don't have to worry about it. You could do this in the dark, really. You don't even need the lights on to do this kind of work and do it right. And then of course finish it all up with 400 sandpaper and you're really ready to go. Just work on getting all the joints on the body nice and smooth before we actually put that bottom block on. We'll work out the fillets in the tail next. Now to get the right alignment on the bottom block, I have to get the cowling bolted in place, and then I use that to butt up against to get the right alignment. And of course I'm just going to run hot stuff up and down this now. Tack glue it on in the corners and then glue away. If you go a little bit at a time too, which is what I'm going to have to do here, I can see this. Just wipe it with your finger to get it to kick off. Then what I'll probably do is stand this up on its tail so the nose is facing up and run a bead of hot stuff down inside. Make sure I get this all lined up here correctly. Now we really have this bottom block on the thin side, so I want to get the alignment good so we don't have to sand a lot away. Now while I have it upside down, you notice I got it sitting up in some dummy wing cores so that I don't crush the canopy. And what I like to do is just go down to about a 2-inch section at a time. Try to get it in good alignment here. Now, like I said, we'll spin it up on its nose and we'll spin it on its side and get that CA to drip right down in there. I glued that little piece on the bottom of the bottom block at the end of the rudder. Got this whole inside of this top block seam hot stuff. I'm going to start sanding it out now. Now this is one of the things you're going to need. It's a piece of wire and a paintbrush just taped to the end of it so you can get way inside that body and get that joint, fuel-proof that joint. It's actually no problem getting in there. I'm not having a good job videoing this because of the angle. Another way to do it would be to stand it on its tail. And of course another way to do it is going to be, because we're going to get it both ways here. And the only idea of this is just to get that fuel-proofed as much as you can, in case we have a little bit of an oil spill in there. I got a good amount of the fuse sanded out here, and I'm going to put a coat of nitrate on the fuse just to harden up the wood so I can do some final sanding. I like to get a couple coats of nitrate on before I start sanding and grinding away at this wood. I got the second and third coats of clear nitrate on there drying. Also got the cowling and some of the little scoops and stuff that have to go on as an afterthought. 3 nice coats of nitrate on here. It's really starting to look like an aeroplane here. We got the final rudder shape that we're trying to look for. Just waiting for this to all dry up now. I think this will be in good shape. Just pan around here and see some of the little detail work. That still has to be final sanded out. And of course we're going to be down to shop tomorrow, so tomorrow we'll just let this dry. And we're going to sand this whole body out again with 400. Put another coat of nitrate on and then tissue it. That'll be the next step. We let this dry up for 2 days now. You can see this has a little bit of a shine on it. Touched up a couple of the bad spots with DAP that we have. This wood is nice and hard now, and it's ready to put the final sanding on before we tissue. Now what I'm trying to do is just get off all the fuzz without removing too much of the dope. Because I obviously want to leave a coat of dope on to attach the tissue to. If you let nitrate sand out 2 days, it'll really sand out like butter. It'll really be nice. Again, I'm going around a radius and like on the cowling here. All the edges get a radius. This way you won't have those sharp spots where the paint wears off right away as soon as you fly the plane. I guess I'll spend an hour or 2 sand this out before I actually tissue it. The tissue will be double O and will be put. Well, one of the things that's real handy to have is a little piece of ringmaster leading edge. Just at this point now we can run our finger in here and pick up all the little high spots. And this will just allow us, just by giving it a, try not to go back and forth, try to go in and out, and you'll notice you can get all the high spots right out in a relatively easy fashion. Then what you do is turn this around so you're on the flat spot, and you can work on all your flat areas around a canopy. Now, I just don't want to forget to mention this on the video, because I haven't put it on before, every time I've put clear dope up around here, I've pulled off the tape and moved it up a 1/64 of an inch, so that I'm getting a blend rather than having a step where the canopy is. I'm getting a nice blend right into the plastic, because eventually we're going to put clear dope right over the canopy and blend this in. There'll be no line at all. So just don't want to forget to mention that. I'm getting a lot of these contours in here right now. You can see in the back of the fuselage I still have some areas of DAP that I'm working on. I'm going to be sanding them down, get the final contours on all this stuff. I'm being real fussy up around the canopy. This canopy will probably be the focal point of the plane. So I don't want to have a little ripple or a blemish or something right up on here. And this is just patience work. This is just, with all this nitrate on here, I pretty much have the grain filled. I'm just looking to pick out little high spots. And the best way to do it is with your hand. Don't even look. Do it in, you can look at TV while you do this, because you'll feel bad spots constantly. As soon as you feel a bad spot, get right on it. And of course then what I like to do is just finish up by using my bare hand in there and getting that transition from where it goes, where the wing is flat and it rides up onto the fillet, getting a nice easement in there. is really the work of a good craftsman. And you always want to finish it up with 400 paper, and just hand sanding. Your hand will get into most of the corners real nice. Now what I'm working on now are those DAP areas that I had in the back of the fuselage. I really want to keep the weight behind the flat hinge line to a minimum, so I'm really trying to sand off every little bit of imperfection back here. This area here, remember we had this was kind of glommy. I'm going to work on that right now. And I'm working in this fillet area, trying to get that perfect. I got a couple little imperfections up in this corner of the fillet here. Try to keep as little weight behind that center of gravity. That is a real ordeal. Not wanting to load up. I noticed the fillets and the elevators and stab are very, very small relative to the wing. Don't want any weight back here I don't need. And of course I'm getting off every little bit of DAP that I possibly can. We fooled around with this rudder shape to finalize the rudder shape about 4 times already. Now once I get it the way I want it, of course I'll make a plywood template up so the next plane can come out without all that fiddling and fooling. This is the first plane of 3 we're going to try to build this winter. I doubt if we're going to get 3 built with the amount of work we have by the shop, but we'll give it a try. Well, we're into this about 3.5 hours now. And I'm going to try to get this tissue on today. I'm expecting company today. Russ Hunsberger and his wife are supposed to come over, so maybe I get Russ to help me tissue this up. It's always nice to have somebody helping you when you're doing tissue. Well, that's for sure. Laying the sheets in place and stuff. I think one of the mistakes a lot of people make is trying to get the tissue on in 1 or 2 big sheets. It's really not necessary. You can get it on in 1,000 little pieces. The idea is just to cover up everything with tissue. We're just about finished with the sanding here. A little detail around the cowling and we'll be all finished. I gotta listen for the door when Russ gets here. Maybe we'll try to get this tissue done today. That could be drying up. You got to give this stuff time to dry in between. So if I get the tissue done tonight, tomorrow we can actually just let this dry out and we could be working on something else. I'm pretty much ready to tissue. Got a little atomizer out here. Brand new razor blade. Then we'll start with the cowling. Good idea to do the bottom first. That's always a good idea. Then you get your technique a little bit sorted out before you get to the top block and things that are really going to matter. Again, we're not trying to cover this in one piece. 1,000 little pieces will be fine. Those seams between the tissue will sand right out. We're also going to double and triple tissue over all the seams where two blocks join down here, we're going to double and triple tissue this all up, add a little strength, and especially by the tail wheel, I can see that's gotten real thin. Any spot on the body you squeeze and you feel it getting a little thin, double tissue it. Now as we do the cowling, you can see we're going to little by little just stretch out all the wrinkles. And because of the shape, we're going to have a big wrinkle right down the middle, so we'll try to get as much of it out as we can. Then I'll take a razor blade and just slit it. And just overlap the edges. Anytime you have a compound curve, that's a good idea. You'll pretty much be able to get almost 99% of the wrinkles out. Just keep rubbing it down with your thumb. Now we'll have some little spots to do up in the front here where there's a compound curve. I'm doing this with the tissue wet, of course. You just work on pulling out all those wrinkles little by little. Almost all of them will come out. Just got the tissue damp with the atomizer. Don't have it soaking wet. And a final step, of course, just rub that tissue right down in there with your bare hand. Wipe it right on your good pants. Your wife will like that. Okay, you'll feel it start to ball up, then you know you're done. And you can set this aside to dry, or in this case we're going to do this little area up here. I'll trim a little piece of this tissue right here. I can use the scrap from the other side. Take a little piece like this. You can do this in two pieces, I think. Yeah, there we go, right? You can just pull off a little piece like this. It's always good if you have a torn edge too. Instead of a cut edge, it'll be a lot easier to sand out. Now the tissue on the cowl serves a couple of purposes. It strengthens the wood, of course. It kind of fuel proofs it and stuff too. But the main thing is it's going to let you use a lot less filler to fill in the grain and still get that grain-free finish that buffs out real nice. Now around this opening here, I'm going to try to stretch this right in so I have tissue inside the opening. That'll be a nice little touch if I can do it. Just wipe it in with your finger. Okay. Roll the edges. Now I've got about 90% of the wrinkles out of this guy. Tissue's hanging out over the edge, but that's okay. You can trim that off later. Now I'm looking around here right now. I'm trying to decide. I got a seam right here, and I have a seam right here. I want to double tissue those areas. So first thing I'll do is trim off, get a razor blade and trim off all of the excess here, number one. That double and triple silk span trick is worth its weight in gold too. You ever notice planes that have 1,000 flights on them and you don't see the glue seams coming through? Well, one of the reasons would be good glue fits, of course, good wood fits. And the other one would be getting double and triple tissue over those wood seams. But what it lets you do too is get a better base, a harder base to sand to. You're not sanding soft wood and hard glue where you're always going to get that ripple coming through. I'm glad I don't do this for a living. I only got to do this randomly. Keep pressing it down as long as it's damp. Get off all the edges. And of course we're going to start on the fuselage, like I said on a video before. We'll do the bottom first. That'll get us a little bit of... You always notice when you're doing tissuing or you're doing doping or anything, sanding even, you should always do the bottom of the plane first. This way you get your technique down. If you're going to sand through or if you're going to screw up in some other way, just to get your hands on that feel for doing it, leave the bottom. Nobody looks at the bottom of these planes even, anyway. Shit, it's a joke. You go to appearance judging, they don't even turn the planes over, and you broke your ass to do the whole bottom of the plane. Now, as we're talking, this is drying up real nice. So what I'll do is just give this another coat, right while it's sticky. Use the usual method of attaching the tissue is just press it down. If you don't press it down, the odds are good you're going to get soft spots that come through. Or you're going to pick up the tape and pick up half of your tissue and paint and everything also. Use your hands just like a paintbrush, especially on compound curves. Okay, the dope starts to get like it's balling up and turning into chewing gum. Whoop, you got to stop. Wipe your hands on your brand new pants. It's definitely a must. Now I got the needle valve hole here, so what I'm going to try to do is cut this tissue in such a way that I can use that tissue right inside the hole. Yes sir, that worked out good. And just in case the needle valve happens to bump up against that while putting it in or taking it out, I won't put a ding in it. This will strengthen it up a little bit. Now also, like I said, the seams and this nose part are going to take an awful beating, so I'm going to do, here I've got the little scraps of tissue here. I'm going to use those little scraps to double up on that nose ring area. And this will be the same technique. Obviously not going to put the whole thing on a video, but the same technique on a fuselage. Just double up on this, any area where you think things are going to take a beat. Now I know the nose ring on this plane is going to take an awful beating from the rubber mounted engine banging up against it. So, in this tissue, as long as it's still damp, you can kind of mold it right around. A little technique involved. There's nothing scientific here, just work it in with your fingers. By now the nitrate dope is dry to the touch. It dries real nice. Nitrate dope and 3608S thinner are going to give you just about the right working time on all this. Okay. Now I know I have that seam right here I want to cover. I don't have any more thin tissue, so I'll cut myself a piece. In fact, I'll cut a nice big strip here. Anywhere you have a glue joint, you double up the tissue anywhere there's a glue joint. Definitely make for a much stronger, less chance the paint will crack after it's out in the sun for a while. Or if one of your friends picks up the plane by the cowling, which already has happened to me a couple times. Some of these bozos that launch your plane. You can just press that down there. We got a wood seam here. We'll try to fill that seam in. Now you might be thinking, well, what the hell? Why not just use heavy tissue instead of double O? Well, that's another approach. But I've noticed when you do one layer of heavy tissue, you do get steps in the finish when you're trying to keep the finish light. When you do double layers of 00, it's like making plywood, and you don't get those tremendous gaps and seams. So my suggestion is use double and triple layers of 00 instead of one heavy layer. No place on this plane is it fiberglassed on the outside of the nose or anything, so I'm relying on good construction, good engineering, and of course the tissue to take up a lot of the strength that normally lets that nose section crack. Now you would think this plane, because it's got a VMAX in it, will not be vibrating anywhere near as much as the old 60 ships, so I might be doing this in overkill. Maybe the next plane I'll try just doing one layer of tissue on the whole thing, but right now I just want to, this is really insurance and overkill here. Alright, I'll let this dry off camera and then try to get a nice closer view on it, and of course trim the edges off camera too. Of course, you could save all the little scraps for going over your, you can get around this ring and a little bit extra here too, that'll help. Oh yeah. Are you recording? Yeah, we'll put a couple of seconds of Russ's plane here. Russ Hunsberger's plane. Alright, we got 2 coats of nitrate on this. The whole body is silk span now. This has been drying out for 2 days. And we're about ready to start sanding this out. Just looking it over a little bit here before I go ahead with sanding it. I'll sand this whole thing out with 320 now. Cowling is ready to go too. Sand this out with 320, and we'll get a couple more coats of nitrate on there, and then we'll actually be ready for the first coat of filler. Since there's the biggest snowstorm of the year outside right now, this will be a good day to really take our time, get in all the corners and edges around the canopy, really get this smooth as a baby's ass before we go on with the next step. So we'll be spending probably 6 to 8 hours today finalizing all the sanding on this before we put on the next coat of nitrate. Just do a little walk around here for you. This is going to be a long day because there ain't nothing else you can do on a day like today. And I don't feel like shoveling snow. This is a good excuse not to shovel snow. Well, I should be seeing you in about 6 or 8 hours. Now when you see the tissue starting to fuzz off, that's about as far as you can go until you get some more dope on there. Got the first coat pretty well sanded out. We started with the cowling, of course. As soon as you see the tissue starting to fuzz off, you know that's about all you can do. Now you got to get another coat of dope on here before you go on to sanding this again.
And if you get lonely, phone me and say
One of the things I really do is after every time sanding down that edge that goes along the canopy, I want to move the tape up onto the canopy now about a 64th of an inch, the thickness of a pencil line. Get this cleaned up, get all the tape lips off there, and then keep sanding this in so I don't have a step. I have a nice smooth blend as that goes up. I can see I've got a pretty good blend right now. Don't want to wait till the plane is ready to be final painted before you do that, that's for sure. Now we get the tape back on the canopy, and we're going to sand out that little ridge there, get that finalized, then put another coat of clear on the plane. What I had to do here, while I'm waiting for this dope to dry up now, I did a test fit on the motor, and I'm going to make a little scoop to cover some of this hole up here. That's going to be the next project, and I made a little extension for the needle valve, and I'll make this little guy up right now. Another thing we're trying to do, we got to leave a little spinner fit here because of the rubber mounts. You can see how much this motor's moving now with the rubber mounts. And to make sure we have plenty of clearance around the whole motor, and of course around the nose ring too. This is the little scoop we put in here to cover up the part of the pipe that's going to stick out, make it a little more aerodynamic. And of course we'll finish this off now. This is the talc filler we're putting on here, nitrate talc filler. And we'll give this 2 days to dry, and this will be ready to sand out. We're sanding off the second coat of filler here. This is dried out nice in the last 2 days. I built up a nice little fillet in this area here and thinned this all out so air will scoop in there. This talc is sanding off real nice because I've let it dry 2 days. When you try to do this on the first day, it doesn't really seem to want to sand off too nice. This isn't balling up at all, it's sanding off real nice. This may only be 4 or 5 hours to get the whole ship done now. Sanding the whole thing down with 320. You can see the dust coming right off. I don't know if you can see it on the video. I'm trying to look at the monitor out of the corner of my eye. Right, we're totally sanded out now. The next step I'm going to do, I'm going to take and sand some of the silver off the wings with 400. And this will be ready for a coat of silver. The next step will be a coat of silver. And now it's a good idea before you spray the final silver, it'll be a couple of coats of silver. We'll do a test piece, in this case it's the cowling. Now I want to show that you can candle, see the little bit of a shine we have on this? And of course it's smooth as a baby's ass. So we're going to try doing a little test on the silver on this guy. Now obviously while you're spraying this, what you want to do is look for dry spots. I see I got a couple of dry spots around the edges where I've sanded through. You can see a dry spot. And of course we want the whole plane to look like an aluminum aeroplane when we're done. Let it dry 4 or 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Give it a second coat. We're going to sand all this silver off anyway. So this coat of silver actually becomes your final coat of filler.